Happy Dream Day. I am Sukirti Gupta, the co-founder of Sipping Thoughts, the leading platform for women in India. Sipping Thoughts, we're proud to say, reaches to over 8 million women on a monthly basis. It is a multi-platform media company that was set up keeping in mind the tagline, Real Women, Real Thoughts. We're a no-judgment platform where we want to create a network of women for women and, of course, for all the men that have supported us. I am so excited today to be hosting this fireside chat with three amazing women on World Dream Day. Each year, World Dream Day is celebrated on 25th September. It's a global initiative which encourages people to strive to make their dreams a reality. Today, we are talking about the Businesswoman's New Handbook and how we can use this to support women to catch their dreams. As an entrepreneur myself, the mission of World Dream Day is so on point in that it advocates dreamers to move forward with their dreams, supports them with strategic mentorship, and empowers their ideas with finance to ensure that they are successful. This has been so critical for me, and it's so true for many, many women. And today I have one such dreamer with me and one that has made so many women's dream come true. It is Apurva Purohit, and she's a name to be reckoned with. Apurva is one of India's most powerful women in media and business. She was the president of the Jagran Prakashan Group, one of India's largest media houses that has a presence across print, radio, digital, and outdoors. Over the years, Apurva has won so many business awards, and she has been named the most powerful businesswoman by both India Today Group and Fortune India. In addition to her prolific career in the media space, she's also an independent director on the board of Mindtree Limited. She's a staunch supporter of gender diversity in the workplace, and she's authored not one, but two books on the subject. She's the author of the national bestseller, Lady, You're Not a Man, The Adventures of a Woman at Work. It is a must read for every woman on a quest for work-life balance and determined to succeed in her professional life. And its sequel, Lady, You're the Boss. With that, a very warm welcome to Apurva. I welcome you to World Dream Day.
Thank you, Sukirti. It's a pleasure to be here.
Lovely.
So, Apurva, let's dive right in. And I would like us to learn what a dreamer you are, because you're now actually in the process of entrepreneurship as you start a new venture called Azol.
So, I mean, it is sometimes I look at it and wonder where I got the courage to do it. But then I look at people like you, Sukirti, and so many other women who've said that, we have to chase our dreams, and there's no age which is a wrong age to start this, right? And Azol really, Sukirti, came from this dream really. And I think all of us who care about the increasing inequality we see around us and worry about fairness and where our planet and mankind is going. And it bothered me too. And the last 2 years of the pandemic has worsened this inequality, whether it is at a gender level, whether it is at the income level, whether it is at a socio-economic front. And the bottom of the pyramid, the lower end of the pyramid, has got impacted very badly. So the dream of Azol really came from the desire to reduce this inequality in a particular ecosystem. So we work with rural self-help groups who have created some wonderful and very high quality local food items, which we are trying to bring to the urban consumer, who is increasingly looking, as we all move towards a more healthy lifestyle, for local, authentic, and high quality healthy food to enhance their cuisine. So the dream really is about connecting these
Lovely.
two groups and building an ecosystem which is equitable.
Wow. I mean, you definitely are dreaming, and I hope and I wish you the best of success in your dream. But you're such a seasoned businesswoman, and you've written such inspiring books. They've become the Bible. I mean, and when I say the Bible, I literally mean the Bible, because so many women have read these books and they take away from it the lessons. What was your inspiration behind it?
I would call it less an inspiration and more an aspiration, Sukirti. So the aspiration really was to see more women at the front, to see more women at the boardroom, to see more women at the top, because we all know that the diversity pyramid has not changed in the last 20 years. I mean, it still remains unchanged with less than 5% women at leadership levels. And both the books really are an attempt from my end to talk to younger women, older women, women in different stages of their career as to how it is possible to reach the top should you have the ability to work hard, and some hacks and some ways of doing it, which I've tried to showcase in both the books.
And they're
Interesting.
actually very, very humorous also. Please don't forget to mention that. They're a fantastic, fantastic read. So as you talked about hacks, what are the new rules for women? And what are those 3 top hacks that we should do and should not do?
I'll start with the 3 things we should not do, Sukirti. And I think we should not minimize our strengths. Women have a way of being far more tentative about their skills, far more lacking in self-confidence. And I think that's the first thing we have to stand up and say, that these are our strengths, and play on our strengths. That's the first thing. The second thing is that uh, we we should not allow the world to bonsai us by telling us what we can do and we can't do. From our childhood, women are always being told that you can't do this, you can't become a pilot, you can't become a scientist, you can't become an entrepreneur, you can't run fast. And I think, in a sense, the world is bonsaiing us, and we should not allow that to happen. And the third thing I would say that we should not do is allow the muscle of choice to weaken. We hand over our choices to our parents, our siblings, our husbands, our bosses, our children. And I think we need to take that back, that control back, which moves me to what we should be doing. And I think the first thing I would really encourage the woman of today to do is stand up and be counted. If our voices are not heard, if we are not vocal enough about what we like or what we don't like, our opinions will not matter. To stand up and be counted. Second thing is, ask for help. Women are tell me that, can we have it all? And my answer is, yes, you can have it all, but you can't do it all. So look for creating a support system, otherwise you will burn out. And the third thing I really encourage women to do is get rid of the imposter that is sitting inside you and telling you, now you're too old, now this is not possible, now you're married so you can't work, or now you're working so you can't get married. Get rid of all these criticisms,
social criticisms,
outside and within us, both ways. Throw them.
But I really love this
Apurva.
phrase. You've introduced us to a new one, bonsai'd out. Go ahead, Pranav.
No, Apurva, I was, whenever I've seen you, and I've often worked with, actually all my bosses have been women. So women have clearly been my direction of making sure what I do, not only of the work that we do now, but also when I started out. I remember my first job, my boss and 2 bosses over were lady bosses, and my team was a group of 15 girl team members. I was the only boy in the team, and I often didn't even realize that who was mothering me and who was being my partner while I was just 21, where I probably didn't even understand moments of areas where I may not have been the right person, not taken empathy in regard. I wanted to pick that up from you and ask you that what have been your moments as a young leader to bring out things which you felt are critical of why you are what you are today. I know it's a journey, but if you could tell us a couple of those moments which bring out, say that this is what was different in the way I thought, may not have been the most acceptable part of that process that time, but you held your ground. But what were those key moments which can really bring people together, especially women who are trying to make that impact and sometimes have that self-doubt? You already answered that. But what have been your personal moments who have brought you where you are today and really holding the flag for so many of us, even me, to really make sure that we are equitable around everybody? And even if we are doing something which is not acceptable, we should do it otherwise. So, what have been your moments to build that?
I would say, one was clearly my upbringing, and I was brought up by a very formidable mother. She herself was a PhD at that time. She's been a teacher all her life. And I think she brought all of us, my brother, my sister, and me, to just not, with a lens of gender.
Yeah.
But the fact that, if my brother could do it, I could do it. I didn't even think of myself as a woman, a female, and therefore males can have this and women can't have that. And that sort of perpetuated this thinking in my mind. And I think a large part of my life has been built around that philosophy, which is and not or. So yes,
Yeah.
I can work and I can have a family. I mean, men can do it, so can I.
Yeah.
That's for many women, the social mores are such that, you work till you get married. Either you can be have a happy family, or you can be successful at work. It's not
Yeah.
an, and that puts a lot of pressure on women. It also puts a lot of guilt on them. So you leave your children and go to work, and that guilt that you face, because everybody's been telling you can be a good mother only when you are with your children. You can't be a good mother if you're going to work. So I think that one thing I didn't face at all, and that gave me a very solid foundation. The other thing is, and I worked in media and advertising, and you will know, Sukirti will know, it's fairly unorganized, disorganized. And as a consequence, we didn't have very formal processes and systems and KRAs and appraisals. So I actually tell people very proudly that nobody's appraised me in my entire life. I also became a leader very early. I started running businesses at the age of 27. So, the fact is, because nobody appraised you, you had to develop your own moral compass, your internal compass of figuring out what are you good at and what are you bad at? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And the moment that does that, you do that, internally you become stronger. The external criticisms don't bother you. You don't look outside for validation.
Yeah.
Because you
So
don't look
important.
for validation, you become more authentic. And therefore, I would say my entire leadership style and journey has been about being authentic. And as you said, standing up for what I believed. So tough love, for example, at the workplace, is a parenting principle. And very many HR heads told me, tough love, I mean, how can you use that as a parenting, as a value system in an organization? It's not corporate enough. But we said, tough love is a very important managerial value. And we put it in our organizations.
Yeah.
But I could only do that and stand my ground and not corporatize myself or become inauthentic because of this background.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In fact, I think one of the things which I was very enthused about when I see your journey has been the ability to constantly inspire not only women, but also people around you. And I think that comes from being authentic, because the idea of driving is not biased towards only women, but the idea to build something is really based on the natural feeling of being creative, or really accepting, or really trusting the purpose what you're right now really focusing on. And we can very clearly see that your journey from the media to even believing that how the rural ecosystem needs to be trusted to come back into the urban play. And while COVID would have really brought that out in front of you to really build value, I think those elements drive an area of excellence without just driving in the construct of gender bias and so on and so forth. And I think those are areas. another question that I had for you, which comes out consistently from the way we look at diversity today, and how have you, inclusion, diversity, strategic conversations, how have you realized that this part of the teams are diverse and they need to be included? What have been things that you have done post including to make them successful as a leader? So that there are entrepreneurs around, there are women entrepreneurs who are building their ecosystems. They can always influence people to come and support them, but how do you constantly build that support to make the larger purpose successful? What have been your mantras of making others successful while keeping the objective in sync?
I would say two things. I think especially around this whole diversity conversation, and you're very right that people get, let's say, women into the room, but what are they doing to support and encourage them to stay back? And I think a lot of effort that I would say I have put in my own organizations has been not so much as just the recruitment level, but also about creating a safe environment, a psychologically safe environment around them, so that they stayed the course. And I think to create a psychologically safe environment, you need to do a couple of things. You need to ensure that there are enough women around, even enough women leaders around, because younger women feel safe, and role models have been a very empowering way of encouraging the diversity agenda. The more role models you see, the more empowered young women feel to stay back. If she could do it, so can I. If she is here and become a CEO of the digital venture, so can I. Or this is which allows women to grow. So I think that will a great bit. I would say the other thing is to bring the diversity conversation as a business imperative. A lot of people think of diversity as, well, it's a CSR initiative. It's not. The more diversity you have, the better your profitability. The more diversity you have, the better your innovation. The more diversity you have, the better are your business outcomes. And today we have research supporting this. So to make sure that everybody understands that a more diverse organization is not only a better, but a more sustainable and an organization which will deliver better business outcomes.
Yeah. To tell about Mirai, in fact, before I tell Sukriti to take over, at Mirai, we have about 85% women. And these women have been, in fact, unlike other organizations, one of the things that I look back, and I am a very strong proponent of that, we never discuss what your kind of partnership with the company is. So you could be part-time, you could be on contract, you can be on full-time, you can spend 2 days a week, you can work over weekends, and we never define the construct of your relationship within the job. And what that has done for us is that we currently have presence in over 60 countries I would say in 59 countries, women leading it, because it gave us access to women who wanted to, but because of the social dichotomy, they had areas where they were just looking for potential flexibility and not looking at the traditional structure of a work environment. And it is not out of something that we brought to them, but they came out of choice. And most of them have stayed with us for in the north of about a decade, and so on and so forth. And the magic to build legacy of partnering around is really about consistency. And if we are able to drive that consistency through the approach of being unilateral, that all are together, for us, it's the other way around. We have more women who work with us, and they are really our dimension of growth. The fundamental play has always been very clear, and the way I look at it is that the construct of building an organization is like building a family, or construct of developing, spending time with your children. So women are far more biologically ready to be leaders than the construct of men. And I think that really has helped us internalize and approach our way of thinking, exactly what you are trying to say. We just need to make sure that they consistently build on the approach with us. Sukriti.
Thank you, Pranav. That was excellent. I mean, I really loved Apurva, the and or, because I think that is something all of us women need to internalize. But as we sit here, and a lot of us sit here and we say, okay, we're sitting in 2021, we're talking about World Dream Day, but we're still talking about challenges that women face. I mean, I'm sure you've been talking about it all throughout your career. I've been seeing this all throughout my career. So, what are these biggest challenges and how do we overcome them?
I think you know this, Sukirti, that the World Economic Forum says that it will take nearly 200 years for there to be a gender equality, which is so sad. 50% of the world's population is women, and we are talking about them as a diversity initiative in 2021, and indeed it is sad, and the pace of change is so slow. So one can get depressed about the slow pace of change. One can look around and say society, you know, by the time social norms change, it's going to be another couple of generations, etc. The other way I look at it is say, while we cannot make change at a mass level, at a global level, can we start making change within each of us? Can we start making a change within our ecosystems? And yeah, I would say the starting point would be, rather than wait for change to happen, to make whatever change we can in and around us. That's one thing. The other thing is, as much as possible, and I say this to all women leaders specifically, that on the one hand, the world is getting increasingly partisan, aggressive, masculine leadership, toxic leadership, is really something that that the world is moving to. However, what the world and our planet really needs is far more of nurturing, far more of empathy, far more of collaboration. And these are the three things that women do extraordinarily well. And yeah, this is the time not to run away and hide, but to showcase these three strengths. That women leaders are more nurturing, women leaders are more empathetic, women leaders are more collaborative, and the world will still take some time to recognize this, but you and I know that is what the world requires. So just keep pushing this agenda, keep pushing this agenda.
And I really like that, because the values that you have talked about, like tough parenting, nurturing, all these values that really go back to the core that women are very, very good at. And I think now we just have to accept that, yes, these are our strengths, and it is okay to bring them to the corporate, to the boardroom, to all of the other workspaces. Any last piece of advice that you would like to give us, as especially women look to go more and more global?
You know, today it is a great opportunity for women who are looking to go global. There is one part of our lives which has got constrained within four walls, right? Many of us are fearful of leaving these four walls, and our little cities and towns and suburbs is something that we've lost touch with. On the other hand, what the technology and being closed in has given us is two opportunities. One, to look within ourselves, to take that pause, reflect about our own lives, and look at our inner growth. And as I think Rena said, the most important journey is the one within. I think that's one opportunity the world, this particular pause has given us. The second thing is technology has given us this opportunity to connect with the whole world sitting here. I know for a fact that earlier, if I would go and do my talks, I would do it only within Bombay, or maximum fly down to Delhi. Today, sitting in front of your computer, you're doing a talk with San Francisco, you're doing a talk with Chicago, and so on and so forth. The opportunity this has given to all of us, we're sitting in front of our screens, we're connecting with a global community, and a community that we can create, which you have done so well, Kirti.
No, beautifully, beautifully said, and so inspiring as always. I think for me, a couple of takeaways that don't get bonsaied. I really, really love that phrase. And the one that you said, the and thinking that we
Yeah.
can and we will. So thank you so much, Apurva, for joining us today on World Dream Day.
Thank you for having me here. Thank you, Pranav. Thank you, Sukirti.
Thank you, Purva, for having me.
Welcome to World Dream Day. We're talking about the Businesswoman's New Handbook and how this can help support women to catch their dreams. I'm excited to have with me Nirupma Subramanian. Nirupma Subramanian is a best-selling author, a professional leadership coach, and a development facilitator with over 25 years of experience. She's committed to helping people discover their potential and lead their lives with passion and purpose. She is guided by the belief that greater self-awareness, along with capability enhancement, can help people and organizations create a significant positive impact. She focuses on ensuring personal growth along with business impact through customized interventions for organizations. Nirupma's book, Powerful, is more than a book. It is a system. The full name of the book is Powerful, The Indian Woman's Guide to Unlocking Her Full Potential. It challenges gender stereotypes in India and subverts the cultural archetypes to empower women instead of keeping them chained. The book is receiving a lot of critical acclaim from Chitra Banerjee to the president of NASSCOM, Devjani Ghosh. Nirupma, a very, very warm welcome. So good to see you here.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
Now, before we begin, as it is, we are talking about World Dream Day. Tell us about the dreamer in you.
Well, I've always been a dreamer, I think, and if I look at it, it's probably three different kinds of phases of dreams. As a young girl, I was a big daydreamer. I used to read a lot and I used to have dreams of doing great and wonderful things, which was, really daydreaming without knowing what you wanted. And after that, it was about dreaming of a better future, of what I wanted to do. And I've always found that I have a big, I won't call it a visionary, but at least the ability to visualize many things. So I have those dreams. The third part of my dreaming is not just dream, but dream big, which is something which took me a longer time to do. So moving from a daydreamer to a dreamer who really dreams big has been quite a journey, but I continue to dream even today.
Wow, that's so beautifully said. You're a seasoned businesswoman, 25 years of experience. What is the inspiration behind your books? And why did you think about what is holding women back and these archetypes that you describe in your book?
Yeah, I think my years of experience as a professional, but also as a woman living in India, both of these have contributed to what I discovered in the book. When I've been doing leadership development work for over 20 years. And invariably, I used to find that in most senior leadership workshops, there would be only men, or at most there would be 20% of women, or very few women when it came to senior level leadership, meetings and engagements. That made me not just disturbed, but also a little curious to understand what's going on here. Because I work with organizations which have 30% at least of women, when they start off. But at the top, it completely tapers off. So I started doing my work, my research, and as an ICF certified coach, I've also coached a lot of men and women. And as I did that, I noticed certain patterns. So archetypes are nothing but energies, patterns. These are universal stories that are present in the world around us. And I found the stories that men told themselves, stories that were told to men about men, and the stories that women told themselves and the stories that were told to them and about them were actually quite different. There was no difference in the skills, in the traits, in the qualities needed to be an effective leader. But sometimes these stories moved us forward. Sometimes these archetypes or energies held us back. And that is how Powerful came about, through a combination of my own experiences as a working woman, as a wife, as a mother, daughter, daughter-in-law, in our cultural context. The second reason was that I found a lot of work has, of course, been done by and for men, and by and for men in the Western world. But there was very little, in terms of leadership development or working with women in our Asian context, which is interesting, which is similar, but also unique in its way. So I wanted to, focus my lens, my gaze on the women around me, women like me, women who grew up with different stories than women in other parts of the world. So that's how Powerful came to be written.
So as you discovered this, what are some of the new rules that you have discovered? Can you tell us what are the top 3 do's and the top 3 don'ts for women?
Yeah, so, Sukriti, I'm a coach, so I do hesitate from giving advice, though my book has it. I would say, it's about making the shift. I would say the first shift is making the shift from I can't to how can I. A lot of women put these barriers on themselves and they say things like, I can't work after marriage, I can't work after motherhood, or I can't take up this assignment. And for me, the do is move to at least asking the question, how can I? Right? And I think the second part is making the shift again to I have to be perfect. I have to be the perfect mother, wife, daughter, employee, and make the shift to I'm good enough. And a lot of women are caught in this bias of constantly proving themselves, trying to do everything, like a big myth of the multitasker and the superwoman. And that keeps them from really enjoying their lives, from making the kind of contribution they want to. So I would say that's the other shift that women need to make. And the third one, and that comes from, of course, Powerful, is to make the shift from I am powerless and helpless to I am truly, absolutely, completely powerful, that I have everything within me that I need to succeed and lead a powerful life. So I think the world, of course, has to shift. We need to end systemic oppression. We need better laws. We need better ecosystems. But even as that happens, I think women don't have to wait for anybody else to empower them. We can draw in on our own power, feel empowered, and be in our power. So broadly, those would be my 3 things and 3 shifts to make.
Fantastic. You found this power, but where do you find inspiration and creativity in the new normal? Because a lot of us are stuck at home, we're stuck in a kind of routine. So where do you find this inspiration?
So, inspiration, I think, is a combination of 2 things. I would say exposure and imagination. Right. And in a way, some exposure has come down because of this pandemic world, but I think imagination has therefore gone up. And when you have a combination of these 2, you create. Sometimes they say necessity is the mother of invention. So we're looking at creative ways to make interviews like this happen, right? To make things happen and move to a place of resourcefulness. So in a way, I think the pandemic has taught us that. So we become more keen observers. We tend to slow down. So I would actually say this has proved to be a period of creativity for a lot of people, not just me. You just have to look at some posts on social media to see people have started cooking, painting, dancing, and doing all kinds of things which they earlier did not do or did not, give themselves permission to do because of this busy, hectic world that they are in. So I would say it's important to slow down, to use the power of imagination, to tap into your own creativity and be resourceful with whatever you have around you. And I think that is important for both men and women to do, so that we get inspired on a daily basis, so that we don't have to wait to travel to exotic locations. No, I confess, I missed that. I travel a lot. I travel to 48 countries, and I thought, by the end of 2020, I would have hit 50 countries. I love traveling, but I haven't been able to do that. But I think despite that, there is immense scope for creativity, as long as you keep the creative spark alive in yourself, within here, rather than, just always look for it outside.
Now let's come back to the corporate world and let's talk about diversity and inclusion. This has become a big buzzword, and you said that, look, you have been in so many boardrooms, you've been training the senior leadership, but we find still the tokenism of this gender lens. Please talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think this is a global agenda. I think this is diversity and inclusion is something that has become increasingly important now. And it's not just, I would say it's not just a fuzzy, nice to have thing. it makes business sense. There's plenty of research from McKinsey, from Deloitte to show that if you have a diverse group of people who are taking decisions, the quality of decisions are better, innovations are better, and companies that are more diverse actually outperform companies that are not. So there is a strong, I will even call it a profit imperative for diversity. At the same time, and this is really interesting, at the same time, diversity and inclusion is in many ways against a very core basic human nature, which is birds of a feather flock together, right? So we look for safety and comfort in those who are like us. So that's one reason why, even though organizations have great policies and intentions, it may not happen. The second is what we call systemic oppression, where many minorities don't feel empowered, they don't come out, they don't speak up just because of years of what has happened, especially with women. Right? Women got the right to vote much later. Many women in our country are still not allowed to go to work. So given the fact that there are years of conditioning and what we call systematic inequality, it's difficult for minorities to step out. And I think the third is what we call, there has to be a leadership imperative. Unless there is a leadership imperative, so-called diversity can become just tokenism, where somebody somewhere says, hey, we need more women, go and get some women to come and join us. It doesn't work because your ecosystem, your support system is not set up. So we need to have a combination of all of these factors so that I think we can become truly diverse and truly inclusive. And you'll notice that we have great laws. The Supreme Court, for example, has recently passed a lot of laws, and even in the distant past, against sexual harassment, fast-tracking punishment for crimes against women. But women themselves hesitate to come forward and report some of these things because of so much shaming around this, so much victim shaming that's going on. So it's going to take some more time for mindsets to shift, but I believe it needs to be done. It needs to be done at an individual level, so that we as individuals become more inclusive, which is actively seek new experiences, meet people who are different from you. And, I see how important that is. We had a short stint where we moved out of India as a family and lived in Bangladesh, in Dhaka. And that experience was an eye-opener, not just for me, but for my daughter as well, just getting to experience different cultures. Travel is a way where you get out of your comfort zone. I think start using inclusive language, stop being judgmental at an individual level, but a lot has to be done by organizations and systems as well. So do I actively support minorities? Do I actively support women when they seek positions? Do I do sessions as a starter on unconscious bias, on sensitization? Do we on the wall, do we have these beautiful value statements, but in practice, we are disrespectful and we exclude certain people from making decisions, then you're never going to be able to truly, wholeheartedly implement your diversity and inclusion imperative.
No, I always say it's incredible that we're sitting in 2021 and we're still talking about the challenges women face. And I feel that I have been now working for 30 plus years, and the conversation, although it is progressing, we are still just progressing the conversation a little at a time. And as a woman leader myself, I feel some of the issues are just so much so that people don't believe as a woman that you can do it, will not give you an opportunity to do it. And even sometimes so much belief that if you are being assertive, it is taken with so much negative language. What are some of the other bigger challenges that you see that women leaders are facing today?
Yeah, I think one is we need more role models. And, we do have women in leadership positions, and I've been fortunate to meet and engage with some of them. But we need many more role models so that women can look around and say, others have done it, I can do it. So it needs to become more of the norm rather than an exception. And the fact that we still use the word woman leader together is, and I use it myself, is an indication that, hey, it's still like a rare bird, which you sight once in a while. And, you think, okay, this is really interesting. So I think we need definitely more role models, and that can happen only if women start owning up their ambitions, expressing their ambitions, come out of their comfort zone, and as I said, very simply, start asking, how can I make this happen, rather than immediately assume that it cannot happen or take a back seat. Secondly, I think, of course, it cannot be a one-sided conversation, right? We need to get men on board, we need to get systems on board, and we need mindsets to shift. And that is going to take some time. So even if women are willing and ambitious, and a lot of my women who I coach have shared that, it's like fighting an uphill battle. I have to battle with my in-laws. I have to battle with my spouse. I'm constantly battling with my children, telling them that, yes, I'm still a good mother, even if I travel. And then I have to battle to get to work because of the commute. And then finally, I have those battles at home. So there's a lot of exhaustion from constantly having to do this uphill struggle. So many women just give up and say, hey, it's too much. And I've done that. When my daughter fell ill, many years ago, and I was working and I didn't have a support system, I admit, I was one of those people who threw up their hands and said, it's too much for me. It's worked out very well for me because I never completely went off, and stopped working and earning my living. But I did take a back seat for some time. And I think it's okay to do that as long as you stay relevant and as long as you have those dreams. So I think the onus is also on people around to say, how can we make it easier in this context for women to live their ambitions, to take charge. That still has to happen.
So what you pointed out very clearly, especially in COVID times, we've seen actually a lot of women are finding it very, very challenging and are actually taking a back seat, surprisingly so. Because, you would have thought this the work from home culture would have actually given them more of an opportunity, but most are finding that it's actually more challenging. So what is your one advice that you'd like to give to women who desire to kind of step up in their career and go global?
So I would say, firstly, and, it comes to having that ambition to grow, to become global. And when I say global, it's actually vocally stating that you want a bigger seat at the table. You want to sit at a bigger table. And, a lot of women don't even voice that because then it becomes questions which say, that means more responsibility, more struggle, more headache. But I think if you don't visualize it and speak it, chances of it happening are very, very less. So there's so much shaming and conditioning against, women expressing their dreams and ambitions that many hesitate to do so. So I would say, dream it, speak it, enlist support, which is very important. And don't think you have to do it on your own. Then go for it.
Very beautifully said, and I love that. Go for it. Thank you, Nirupma. That was absolutely fantastic advice.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here. And I think I just want to say to all the people, and including women, that you are already powerful. Just go and live your power.
Welcome to World Dream Day. We're talking about the Businesswoman's New Handbook and how this can help support women to catch their dreams. I'm excited to have with me Ruchira Chaudhary, a good friend and an amazing, amazing business executive. She has a diverse and eclectic functional background in mergers and acquisitions, organizational design, cultural and leadership, coupled with 2 decades of experience in emerging markets in Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa. She's held leadership roles in organizations like Medtronic and AIG in Singapore, the Commercial Bank of Qatar, Qatar Telecom in Qatar, and Tata Consultancy in India. Her consulting repertoire spans multinationals, government agencies, and leading local business organizations across industry sectors. She also teaches and coaches MBA students and senior business executives as an affiliate faculty at several business schools such as SMU, NUS, and IMD in Singapore, the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, and most recently, the London School of Business. She is also the author of Coaching, The Secret Code to Uncommon Leadership, which is commissioned by Penguin Random House and was released in the US in March after multiple successful launches everywhere across the globe. The book has received so much praise, and also from Sheryl Sandberg, who's the CEO of Facebook, and many other leading women as they go to the book on coaching, and it has really become the Bible for coaching. Ruchira, a very, very warm welcome. So excited to have you here on World Dream Day. But before we begin, and I would love for you to tell us about the dreamer in you.
Thank you very much. It's a real privilege and of course a pleasure to be here and I guess share those dreams with you. I don't know, I didn't think of myself as much of a dreamer. My star sign is Piscean, so they say apparently we are dreamers. We brood and we dream and we think about changing the world. And I think in some ways, if we truly, open our minds to the fact that there is an alternative way, an alternative model of leadership like I've talked about in the book, I think one step at a time we can get there. So the book that you talked about, I think is perhaps one of the dreams I've always had, reimagining the world of leadership, right? Where a leader is not just one that elevates himself or his organization. A leader can do both. He can grow his numbers, but he can also focus on his or her people. A leader can enable, can develop, can build, and take others along in the journey. And the best in the business, as we are now seeing, are those that are growing their people and the numbers are following, right? And so me, that was the inspiration for writing the book. That's my dream. And I hope that one day every leader will be that leader coach that enables others, that shines a light on others. And when they shine the light on others, they will shine brighter. When they elevate others, they will soar even higher. That's my dream. And I hope someday we'll see it come true. We're already making strides towards that.
No, that is fantastic, because I hope we do see your dream come true. I want to ask you, because coaching, and you've taken on this very, very important subject. A lot of people are talking about it, coaching, but you have said that this is actually the secret code to uncommon leadership. Let's delve a little bit more into that.
So, a lot of people ask me about the book and say, oh, you've written this great book on leadership. So I say, honestly, this is not a book about leadership. My book is not giving you the code to leadership. It assumes you're already a good leader. This book is about uncommon leadership. It's about making the journey from being a good leader to a fantastic one or an uncommon one. And I define uncommon leaders as those that maximize their success by growing others. They understand that it's not just about building an empire or making, millions and billions in revenue. It's also about the journey, and it's also about taking your teams along with you, relentlessly focusing on your people as you focus on growing your organizations, right? And coaching is like the key or the code that unlocks this uncommon leadership. And I talk about coaching as, a series of interactions or conversations which focus on building the performance and the potential of an individual through self-enabling and non-directive conversations. That's what coaching is, right? So that's what the book is about, crystallizing coaching, and then moving from the why of coaching to the how of coaching. How can you become that coach, the rudder, that compass that guides your people, and that helps untap those reservoirs of creativity or innovation that you have.
Yeah, no, especially as we move into the new century, I think, and the new years, we are realizing more and more that you actually need to build the team and move the team with you. And coaching is an excellent, excellent way to do so. Pranav, I know you have loads of questions, so over to you.
No, Ruchira, thank you so much for coming in. And, the conversation that you were having, you were just having a royal conversation with the private office's CEO, who is the only lady CEO for all the Emirates, all the 8 Emirates private offices ecosystem. So Madam Salva is the only CEO who has joined the position from being a diversity individual. And I restrain myself from saying that word because, leaders often have the opportunity to really bring things together. And obviously, it's not only benchmarked by either top line or bottom line, but it's really something within. I wanted to build on that and ask you that piece, that with your set of experiences that are not only positioned or have been based out of your experiences in countries like America or Middle East or Southeast Asia, what has been critical in your sense to identify the set of the true skills of what makes a true leader cut across various geographies? What is it with people who can really bring people together, not only relevant to their businesses or their culture, but really bring the world together, with COVID really bringing us all together more connected and really making it all relevant to all of us. So with leadership, with coaching, what is it that you would like to tell our set of people? Really give them the magic mantra. What is the magic mantra you would like to give them?
I'm not sure, Pranav, that I can answer your question with a perfect magic mantra, but let me attempt it in my little wisdom of, as you said, working across geographies, working in the Western world, and also working very extensively in the Middle East. I've lived and worked in Doha, and I worked very extensively in UAE, in Bahrain, in other parts of Middle East and also North Africa. And I also speak some smatterings of Arabic that has helped me get an appreciation for that part of the world. So in my mind, a leader, as I said earlier, is the one that enables. A leader, Mahatma Gandhi said this, right? A great leader is not one that has many followers, but a great leader is one that builds other leaders. And in the modern day, whether it's a Sheryl Sandberg or it's a Christian Clayton, they say the same thing in different ways. Good leaders are those that leave a legacy behind. They make you a better version of yourself, and that impact should last a lifetime. So now to answer your question about how does this vary across cultural paradigms, I think the constructs are the same. You have to be a leader that just doesn't focus on the numbers, right? The narrative around leadership has changed today. If you were to look at your leadership scorecard, I guess, for the lack of a better word, think of it in 4 buckets. So think about the financials, which has always been a metric. Think about the governance, or what we call the structural capital. So financial capital, structural capital, in terms of how you govern the organization, your relationships, that's how you set the norms, etc. Then you think about the processes and the systems, the internal guiding factors, your relationship with your customers, right? So the relational capital. And then the last bit, which is what we're talking about, is human capital, building those reservoirs of human capital. A good leader has to straddle all of these worlds. And the world out there is very complex. It's very different from how it was a decade ago, or even, prior to World War II. Now our businesses are so complex, so complicated. We have so many interconnected alliances that no one individual can have all the answers. Right? A good leader is one that leverages the collective intelligence of his or her people, that seeks opinions, diverse opinions from his or her people. And to your point, that pandemic has taught us that. Pranav, Ruchira, or Sukirti, nobody had answers to what the pandemic would look like, right? And no leader had those answers. The businesses that have survived and actually thrived this pandemic are those that have constantly asked their people. They haven't told their people what to do, but they've taken the views of their people into cognizance. The best ideas have come from not just the 2 or 3 people at the top, but those that are, part of the value chain down the line. So I think that's what good leaders do across geographies. They solicit opinions. They build reservoirs of trust. So unless you trust your leaders, you don't open up in front of them. And unless you believe that they have your best interest at heart, you don't give your best in organizations. And the best leaders are also resilient. They're resilient, but they also ensure that their people are resilient and they can stand up after falling down. The best leaders will take those cultural nuances into cognizance. You may coach differently in the Middle East, you may coach slightly differently in the Western world, or you might coach differently here in India, where I'm based today, right? The styles may vary, but at the end of the day, that's what defines a good leader. It's how you take your people along in the journey.
I want to pick up trust as a word that you spoke about, and I think it's just pivotal on the way you either build businesses or you either build a personal relationship. I think one of the things that I would love to hear from you is that post you have built that trust of in a classical transaction ecosystem where you have identified an individual, and just like any relationship, the trust is built over a period of time. In an organization, especially when you are building leaders, and this is also in respect to when you're talking to women leaders today who are entrepreneurs in the smallest of towns across the world, who are identifying partners, who are identifying peers, identifying skilled ecosystems who they are trying to invest into to build organizations. Post that identification, the inclusion of trust in everyday actions, what are things that you think are must do so that they can really flourish as much as a leader who would have you on your side on an everyday basis? What are things that they should always remind that Ruchira would do this and they would like to do it as well?
All the complicated questions today, and we don't have enough time to go through it. I'm sure there are many, many constructs, but let me think of a few that come to my mind. If you truly want to be that leader that builds and enables others, you have to think of a few key principles, I would say, or the mantra would be, first, you have to start this trust journey that you talk about. Before you build those reservoirs of trust, you have to know yourself, which means you have to be more self-aware. We talk a lot about that, and good leaders are those that know themselves. And how do they do that? A fair bit of self-reflection, but also building a culture where you constantly seek feedback, not just give feedback, but also seek that feedback. To be acutely aware of your strengths, but also areas where you could do better. So that's where the journey starts, knowing yourself. The second part of that is knowing your people, right? Forging genuine relationships with the people that work with you, that work for you. And it's not about saying that I have 3 reports or 5 reports and one of them does marketing and the other one. It's really getting to the heart of who are these people? What are their lives? What are their passions? What do they like to do outside of work? Those are the kind of relationships you need to build with the people that work with you. You have to create safe spaces. Unless you create safe spaces where people feel that they can be themselves without fear of judgment or being penalized, that's again, I guess, the foundation for trust. So the best leaders will create safe spaces. And we also know that safe spaces help us innovate, become more creative, because we know that we have the, the leeway to be ourselves in such an organization. And so I guess all of that leads to building that foundation of trust. And the pandemic, incidentally, a lot of research has been telling us that, especially with the work from home, people tell us that, when your personal and professional worlds are colliding, they feel their bosses are constantly checking on them. And that's not good trust, right? So we have to constantly move away from that checking in versus checking on people. We have to trust our people more to do the job. And that is, I think, in my mind, good leadership. I think there are many, many more things, but if you just focus on a few of these vital ingredients, I think that makes for a good leadership recipe.
Fantastic. Sukirti?
So coming back to the Businesswoman New Handbook, let's talk about, in this new post-corona, post-COVID era, are there new rules for women? Can you tell us what are the top 3 do's and don'ts?
As somebody who is a very strong advocate of an equal world, I do a lot of writing on women's topics, women's issues. The gender pay gap is something that's been very close to my heart. Let's start with the top 3, and there'll be many more than 3, but let's say. I think women today, first things first, I think we have to not be bystanders when it comes to our careers. I constantly encourage young women to say, go out and seek that mentor. Go out and ask your leaders for coaching if you aren't getting any. And don't just stop short at asking for mentors or coaches. Seek sponsorship, right? A word that we've recently started using a lot in our corporate vocabulary. Sponsors are those that go the extra mile, that open the doors for you. These are influential people who know you. You have credibility with them, and they can truly shape your career orbit. So go all out and seek those sponsors. In order to seek those sponsors, do some fantastic work. There is no substitute for that. Do great work, and then don't be afraid to ask for people to open the doors for you. And the third thing is, believe in yourself. One of the biggest, I guess, casualties of women not making it to the top is not the fact that they're not competent or capable or bright or smart. It's that we're constantly doubting ourselves. We're constantly undermining our achievements, and we're constantly plagued by self-doubt. So believe in yourself because you have it in you to go forward. I think if we just follow those 3 tenets, it'll make a huge difference to how we perceive ourselves and how the world perceives us.
And any don'ts, anything that we should not be doing.
Don't undermine yourself. Don't strive for perfection, right? Think less and do it. So back to the point that I was saying, it's, this whole nurturing where we are always taught that we need to have all the answers, we have to be perfect or nearly perfect before we do anything. And what, as I was saying earlier, the biggest casualty is not that women don't do well, it's just that they don't even get into the race because they give up even before they try, because they constantly want to be perfect. Study after study will show us that more qualified women will not ask for promotions, they will not seek for raises because they think they're not there yet. Whereas underqualified men and those that probably don't tick all the boxes when you're asking for a promotion will do it. But here, this is a competence and the confidence scenario. It's lack of confidence, not competence. So don't be underconfident, don't seek perfection, and constantly don't undermine yourself. You have it in you.
Yeah. No, Ruchita, in fact, I'm just going to jump into that piece, and this is exactly what we do within our firm when we are building teams. And I was telling this to Sukriti the other day that a large part of our team are women across the world, and they have diverse. So we don't even negotiate the parameter of what their work relationship with us is. So people can work. It's very, very objective towards the work. So if there's a runway of 15 days, you work 15 days. If you are busy for a family ecosystem, which you are committed towards, please take that time. So it's really, really personal ecosystem. So we as an organization don't have a leave attendance policy as long as you are committed to the purpose of trust. But I think one of the key ingredients of reminiscing the agenda of why we did what we did was the fact that contribution often comes out of a largely substantiated perspective of what the objective looks like. And in most scenarios, those objectives change in the journey on the way. And you're so right that once you are able to identify the objective of, say that, this happened and this I can't do or this I can do, things become in far more better equilibrium rather than just being tainted against you if you don't do it at all. And I think that's one central part for women who work within us, where the premise is that with projects, you define how much you want to work around, and that generates, going back, the trust that we want to expect out of people. It's just our example. It's worked fantastically for us. It's also given us access to great markets and partners who probably were not even in the market because they only thought that that is what a job should look like or that's what a partnership should look like. One question I had for you, and tell me, while you coach leaders who are either men or women, which one do you prefer to coach?
That's a trick question. Honestly, and I mean it. I mean, for me, the destination or the end goal is the same. Whoever I coach has to become a better version of himself or herself. But I will say this, and it's a good platform for me to talk about it, linking it back to Sukirti's question. I will coach the women slightly differently, right? I have a framework. I talk about it a lot in my book. And I think how should you focus your coaching intervention? Or rather, what should the coaching outcomes be? I call it the 4C+ model, the 4 cornerstones of coaching. Clarity, you give people a lot of clarity when you coach them. You give them consciousness, which is another word for self-awareness. You give them capability. Obviously, you build a capability, which is what the whole premise of coaching is. You make them better than they were before. You unleash those reservoirs of creativity and innovation. And the 4th cornerstone is confidence. When I'm coaching women, I really, really focus on that cornerstone. And these 4 cornerstones will come alive in any organization if we have a culture. That's the 5th C. But for me, it's really about bridging that confidence gap. It's really about the self-belief that you have it in you to go forward. I have often been in situations where I meet very senior women, who are at the pinnacle of, their organizations, at the top of the pyramid, and yet they're plagued by self-doubt. When they get fantastic assignments, their first thought is, oh, what about my spouse? But it might change. It might have to change I have to change my child's school. It's never about you. It's always about the obstacles that your role will cause others, right? And that's how we are. We undermine our own achievements. We constantly worry about the ramifications, and often we wonder if we deserved it in the first place, right? Or if it happened to us by accident. I've experienced it. Sheryl Sandberg talks about it in Lean In, and I'm sure almost every woman that I know of has experienced it. So I think that's a bit that I really want to focus on.
Fantastic.
Well, Ruchira, I want to delve into 1C a little bit deeper, because a lot of us are talking about creativity, and especially creativity in the new normal. Where do you find your inspiration in creativity?
Dreaming, I suppose. I don't know. I think, as they say, it was the left brain and the right brain business. I was always the more creative type. I used to write a lot. And, school and college, I used to win all these essay competitions. So when I went to the University of Chicago, which is where both of you have also been, I realized I had to really develop the other side of my brain and become a lot more logical and numerate, etc. And I think that marriage of my left brain and right brain is what keeps me going. That's who I am, right? And I have the ability, and even with coaching, I think I have the ability to seamlessly marry a lot of the classroom learnings that a leader is undergoing, because I can relate to the same concepts, but I'm able to then appreciate their own personal trials and tribulations because of how sensitive I am towards I think I have high EQ, so that sort of helped me. Call it creativity, call it being ingenious, but. And by the way, this is the cup your organization sent me for being, 21 women in 2021. For reimagining leadership, so I've saved it. I only drink coffee in this or the University of Chicago cup that I have.
Now for my last question, what's your advice to women who desire to go global?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and in many ways it relates to what I said earlier about the do's and the don'ts that you asked for. I think the world is a small place now. Yeah, we live in a very global world, and there's nothing that stops us from really going all out to conquer the world. But we still are constantly challenged by certain issues that we women seem to disproportionately have to deal with, right? And I think, to me, one of the biggest challenges is a gender pay gap. I've been a strong advocate of it, and the World Economic Forum is telling us we're still nearly 100 years behind getting equal pay as men. And this we see this phenomenon not just in regular full-time jobs. Ironically, we see it even in the gig economy, right? Where it's surprising, because you would simply hire somebody for a short period of time for the skills that they bring to the table. So this mindset has to change, and I think we have to start advocating a more equal world. And those that are in positions of power, more often than not, those are men than women. We have to help to move that needle. So I give that advice. If you are a woman in a position of power or influence, please add your voice to this narrative. Please change it. If you're a woman who can make a difference, mentor and coach those that you can. And if you're somebody who's starting out in this world, don't be afraid to ask for those mentors, those coaches, and those sponsors. Create or assemble your own career ladder. It doesn't even have to be a ladder. It doesn't have to be a vertical path from one rung to another. Sheryl Sandberg calls it a jungle gym. You can call it whatever. My own career path is so eclectic, or it's such a mishmash of going up and pausing and then squiggly lines, right? It's never been a straight path. So I guess, add your voice for a more equal world, mentor and coach, seek coaching for yourself. And I think don't be afraid to take risks.
Yeah, no, I'd like to see this open communication, because there is a meme going around. One girl has posted it and she said, I got a job and, I was making 100K. They made me an offer for 120. I was very excited. And I started and I realized all the men were making 150K. So yes, the whole question of this open communication and really being transparent and moving towards this transparency is actually quite vital. Any last thoughts, Pranav or Ruchira, before we close our conversation for today?
No, I just wanted to summarize. In fact, Nisha is such an inspiration to everybody around us, not only advocating the change, but also been someone who really brings out the demons in all of us in some ways. And sometimes it's just so important to have someone like you who points out some things that are just in the structure and we have not done something about it, and you are still making the same mistakes just because someone is not pointed up. I just wanted to really appreciate and thank you so much for bringing all of us in. We have a very large young community of partners, employees, startups who are listening to you and getting motivated, and also not only motivated but realizing some of the potential pitfalls which maybe they did not know and just believe that's the way it is. So I think you're not only doing a fantastic job to change what's happening, but also paving a great path to make future far more sensible, if I may use that word. I really appreciate you taking out time, and I give you Godspeed to make sure that all of us be equal and make sure that we contribute together so that everybody lives in a happier place in future.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruchira. Thank you, Supriya.